Hey, how's it going, eh? Welcome to the show. My name is Chris, and today we're gonna do some art, okay? Right. Hey, look at that. Phil is totally here on time. Welcome to the show, Phil. This is how I'm gonna talk all day long. Awesome. It's awesome. Okay, maybe not, but you get the idea. So, all right, welcome aboard, Phil. Look at you. First one out the gate. Good stuff, buddy. I'm glad you joined. All right, let's pick up from yesterday. So yesterday I produced this, and I put a post of this up today. Wink of a bunch of different mark making material that you can use in order to, uh, just interpret the same image in different ways. And so this is up on Instagram and on Facebook right now. So if you want to look at it and write down any ideas you might have about how you can utilize some of these things and maybe explore and experiment with some of that. Great. Okay. But I've got a brand new spanking fresh piece of white paper. Nope, I drew in the back. And black paper that we're going to do some more with. Because, there's a lot of different mark making material, different mark making media that's out there for us to use. So where I got a note, I wrote a note down so I could remember some of the other things we're going to put together. So what we've covered so far, we've done some exampling of so far anyhow, is we've got black acrylic with a palette brush, which is one of these. Hold on, that one's not going to do as a good example. One of these little saucy buggers. Up here, we've got some white sharp marker. We've got white paint over black scraped paint. We've got black acrylic paint dry brush, black acrylic paint wet brush, the graininess of black pencil crayon, different interpretive lines that we can put down with our pressure, which is an important thing to consider. White ink pen crosshatch, black watercolor paint, white pencil crayon with acrylic paint, white paint on black electrical tape. You have some ballpoint pen. You got some white chalk. The white chalk I put a medium over top of so it would stay there. Because in all honesty, that white chalk, the wind blows through the window and it disappears off your surface if it's not locked in somehow. White crayon, white pencil crayon with white ink. This is, I think that's just a white ink with a brush. Oh yeah, white brush pen right there, white ink. Dipping pen, that's white paint on a blue piece of tape. So this is again talking about what we talked about yesterday about modulating your surface. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that. I think that I'm going to end up having to do 3 of these things because one is these harder mark making materials. Today, number 2 is a lot of softer mark making materials. And then I think there'll be a third one where we talk about different affectations that we can do to the surface that we're working on, modulating the surface and doing different sorts of effects. Some of it I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to be able to do. Like, I'm not going to marble paper, during one of these brief talks. But we've got gray pencil. There's an H pencil, which is really a really hard pencil, so that's it doesn't come out as dark as as a B pencil. We'll get into that today. Gray brush pen, white acrylic tape over blue. And again, talking about the texture of it, I even make a little note. I love this texture. I love it. So black pen, dipping pen with splashes. And when I say dipping pen, what I'm referring to is one of these little nibs. I don't know if you can see this. This is actually a scratch-all. You put this where you're doing your lino cuts with. It's a speedball. But I actually, because of the size of my mitts, I actually use this as my my preferred choice for doing dipping pen drawings. And of course, I also use it for lino cutting too. I've got a whole bunch of pieces inside for little bits to do that with. There's a 2B pencil smudge, so you can see the comparison between the 2B to the H, right? Black pencil crayon, mixed media ink paint, a Sharpie marker, black ink. I think I did that one. black pen, white acrylic paint, mixed media. So basically the gist of all this yesterday was looking at all of these different ways and means in which we can start to interpret the same image. But there's even more. And so we're going to do quick rudimentary little exploration into this. Just give me a second. I'm going to... Do I have a clip around? Why would I have a clip handy? Why? Not when I need one. Okay, give me 1 second. Back in my day when a fella needed a clip, he just had one handy. Anyhow. Okay, so I'm just going to clip the paper like so, and then I'm going to clip that on the side. So that should be in camera for everybody to see. So, all right, and then I'm going to put a little book underneath here to prop it up at a better angle for people to see from, as opposed to the standard working angle that I have it at. So I've got a little list here, some of the things we're going to look at today. Chalk, Conte, graphite, crayon, pastel, ink dipping pen. We're going to get into that a little more. Applications of tape and electrical tape, charcoal stick, charcoal pencil, some stamping. I'm going to show you different ways that we can use gauze in what we're doing. Different types of erasers and some of the effects that they can give us. There's a couple things that I want to get into in the future, which is like silver point and the usage of alcohol over water on different things. And then there's some stuff that you can do with tools like stencil brushes. Oh, look at the dust just flying off that. Can you see that? It's like a smoky room now. Anyways, little different effects that you can get for things. There's so many different kinds. So let's get right into it, right? There's so many different kinds of sharp mark making tools that we can use. And by said example, I've got, this is a charcoal pencil, okay? And it's a hard, it's not a charcoal, I'm sorry. It's a very hard drawing Conte. This is a white pencil crayon. This is a leadless pencil crayon, so there's no wood in this sucker. Got your standard pencil crayon here still as well too. But even with the same medium, there are just so many different examples of, what can be used here. So, again, it's the sort of thing I talked about yesterday about exploring these possibilities and exploring these different, see, here's a standard white pencil crayon there, right? Remember what I said yesterday about the square ones or rectangular ones from places like the dollar store tend to be harder, and the rounder ones, they tend to be softer. So I don't know if that's a universal truth. It's just what I seem to find. We've got a white crayon. We've got, and this is one of these artsy-fartsy, oh, it's a drawing crayon. Well, it's a crayon. There's a piece of Conte there. There's a piece of chalk here. I've got some pastels nearby that I can pull a piece of white out of that. So that's just some of the white tools that I pulled up today, in addition to inks and things like that. Some of the things that we can do, though, when we're looking at these different tools is to figure out. So first off, I'm just going to keep drawing the same image. Okay, I'm just going to keep doing an eye. And the reason that I'm going to keep doing an eye, in all honesty, is the uniformity of the image allows us to focus less on different pictures and focus less on the differences of one thing to another, and just allow ourselves to just absorb the fact that it's the same image over and over again. So some of the things that you can do, and I hope I still got some ink on this pad. This is a white ink pad. These are easy enough to find. And it's just a regular generic old pattern stamp, right? But so I'm going to start off here. If you place a stamp down on your piece of paper, and preferably you do that in camera. Give me a second. Terribly sorry. So all I've done is inked up the stamp and put the stamp down on paper. And I'm going to do it a couple times. I'm going to do it once so that you've got your simple image in the back. But at the same time, if you don't use it in such a uniform way, but you overlap some of these stamps so it just becomes a texture in the background, and then you go over top of that with something, that gives you something different again. Give me a sec. Always clean up the tools. Always. So that's one way of that we can use something to modify our surface. Now, I've also got some letter stamps nearby. If I get an opportunity in a moment, I'll pull some of those suckers out too. But we're going to throw this aside for the moment. Now, I'm going to do this in reverse as well on the white. So I'll pull the white page out here as well. There we go. Look at that. Happy. I'm going to have to, for all you Tom Jones fans out there, I'm going to have to turn the old Dancing Tom off for a second because we need a little more screen. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, Tom. Anyhow, so I've got the same stamp. I've cleaned it off, and I'm going to use the same stamp again. And hopefully I can get some ink. So this is just a little ink pad, like, everybody's used under the sun in the course of their lifetime. So I'm just putting down, I'm not overly concerned about the cleanest, most crispy stamped image ever, because that doesn't matter. None of that matters. So we're going to throw that. That's a good start for, so the point is I'm just modifying the background. I'm just modulating the surfaces in the same way as I exampled yesterday by saying you can throw down watercolor, you can throw down ink, just do a little flat wash on something and use that in order to be a basis that you're going to build on top of, right? So then if we look at using these two sources, and if we look at, once again, the same eye that we've been doing over and over and over again. So this is going to get messy. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So if I take the same image and I start cutting into it, now in this case, I'm using some white Conte. It's a black piece of paper, so I'm going to start off by throwing some of this white Conte down. But at the same time, I'm going to put black Conte in this image at the same as well. So I just thought that I'll walk you through what it is that I'm using as I'm using it. So with any of the tools that we're using, with any of the mark making media that we've got in front of us, I'm going to do my best to keep you aware of what it is that I've got in hand at the time. And yeah, woo-woo, right? It's just, hopefully this is going to be of some help to you and allow you to take from what we're setting down here today. So one of the things that you can do now is, as I'm putting some of this Conte down, you can do all kinds of fun little things like brushing it out or tamping it down or rooting it in. I know that a lot of purists that, well, I only draw on these materials and I do it this specific way. Well, over time, you're going to find ways that work for you. And they're not going to be the same as the person beside them. I don't believe in hard, fast rules, clearly, in anything. So we're just trying to put some of these marks down, and then I'm tamping them out a little bit and just coming back in and applying a little more pressure to get that line down a little bit better. But it's still just looking at the same structure, the same surface image of the eye and how it sits on the face. But because we've got this underlying texture that we've put in here, it sort of gives it some kind of, it gives it little bits and lines and little bits and bobs to move around on the surface with. It might seem counterintuitive to some people, but there's a great deal of people that have a hard time with just getting down to work. And the reason they have a hard time just getting down to work is because I think, this is my assessment of it, and not because I think this is how it applies to me. there's a daunting thing about looking at a blank piece of paper. And sometimes that blank piece of paper keeps you from getting started, whether it's paper, whether it's canvas, whatever your surface is. My point is that blank image staring at you can hold you back. So rather than allowing myself to get set by that, what I'll do instead is modify that surface so that I can just jump right into it. There's little tricks and thingamajobs and whatchamacallits that we're all going to do in order to find ways and means for us to get down to work, to figure out what it is that will help us to get on with our project or our our obligation, our job, if it's an illustration for somebody, whatever it is. And there's all kinds of techniques and things that I really don't want to get too much into today, because it's really going to be a little more time consuming than I intended it for. Let's just get basics down for everything here, so that you can just see the inherent difference between one material's marks and another. But it doesn't change the fact that you can put down some Conte and do things with your finger, or do things with some kind of bludgeoning tool or a brush and shake things out, and then we'll be doing a lot of that. But there's different things that we can use to scrape into that as well. Different things that we can do to pull those marks down. Shave off all the excess, which also, by the way, tends to dull your black. So just so you know. But you can push some value around inside your thing by using different tools inside. Takes the edge off a little bit. So Conte's fun. And I try to make notes on everything as I go. And for that, I've got Mr. Jelly Roll. So just straight Conte. And then you've got white and black Conte on pre-stamped image. So, that's kind of a nice thing. There's, I'm going to do something else that sort of defies thinking. A friend of mine really engages and embraces in this notion. So just give me a second. I'm throwing down some white paint on a little palette. It's a dish that I use. So this is just your standard little palette knife. So if I'm looking at my image and I'm trying to think about some of the little different aspects to the image and to draw that in, Philip says, I miss using Conte. I haven't used it in years. Used to use it mainly for the life drawing classes. Oh, of course. Yeah, no, that's definitely the principle for that thing. Philip says, I never liked charcoal, too messy, but I really like Conte. Well, I'm going to do some charcoal messing in a second. So I'm just looking at the little basic elements of the image here. Probably working too small for the knife that I'm using. I could be using the tip for some of this, but I'm not being overly precious. I'm just putting down some shapes and some marks, and cutting in some of these details so that as I'm using this just a palette knife, and I haven't reloaded it yet, so I'm still pulling off whatever I can pull off out of it. But you can see how you can get a different energy in trying to interpret the same image by just using the knife. And see how tight I can get this if I use just the tip. Behave. So as I'm putting this in and I'm trying to find some of this information for interpreting the same image once again, but with a different tool, there's going to be all kinds of different ways that we're going to have to move ourselves around. You're going to have to, modify the way in which you may well draw. Once again, keep a cloth beside you whenever you're working, especially on stuff like this, because who knows? Who knows how big a mess you're about to make. All right, so I got a little brush here. So in the same way as I talked about using a square head brush yesterday and doing your imagery, I'm also a proponent of just drawing straight up with the tiny brush, and again doing the same imagery once again, and not being, but in a more gestural style. And what I mean by that is not being too precious about making sure that it looks however it looks. As if I was being more controlled, I'm not worried about control right now. I'm just throwing marks down and allowing the movement around. So even if it's the same thing as we were doing yesterday, we're getting different marks and different approaches out of it. But it's just chasing down. So it's like a light wash, I guess, the way that I'm working right now. So it's kind of like an under image. I like doing stuff like that. I don't know if anybody else does that or not, but and then, well, now that we're on this kick of modifying the surface, I'll do this in advance of working on it. I will just put marks down on a surface and not. Sorry, I'm using my hand as a blocker. So this is just spatter that's on the surface of the image, and then you build your drawing in there, much as in the same way as you do whatever else you do. But this is even more loose and open and interpretive, and we'll come back in a second, throw some black to this too. But so it's, again, the same way, same materials, different way of processing it. But having that spatter in there is kind of fun. I like doing stuff like that a lot. I don't know about anybody that might be watching this while we're doing it or after the fact. So I'll just go back and throw some more down. All right. Now I'm going to come in. So we've modified our surface in a white, but I'm going to, where is it? There it is. Okay, sorry. I'm going to come in with a black and just some black ink here. There we go. And I'm going to draw over top of this little nexus of stamps that we've put down here. All right, so now I'm doing the same image again, opposite. It's kind of, I know this is a little bit dull and repetitive, but if there's something in there that you can get, that you can utilize for whatever it is that might be holding you back from a project that you're on, yeah, great, do it. Why not? There's so many different ways that we can tell our tales, that we can then do our images, interpret our stories, that we might not necessarily allow ourselves the opportunity to do, because it would just be something that may well feel anathema to us in our consideration. Like, well, I draw a pencil, or I draw digitally. Why would I, oh, right, I could do that, couldn't I? And when you start allowing those different things in, and if you can just find a little space where you can have stuff just set up so that you can use it whenever you need to use it, that works out pretty well. So now I'm going to grab, I'll let this black ink dry for a second. I'm going to be doing multiple things at the same time, just because one thing has to dry and another one, Okay, so palette knife, acrylic paint, And then we've got wet, little pigment, just a little bit of pigment. And that's acrylic. This is a spatter. Which is acrylic. So what I'm trying to show is that these different methods and these different approaches that we can take. Sorry, I got stuff in the way here. These different methods and these different approaches to how we do things liberate us in how we go about interpreting the same image. I'm going to say that a lot. So it'll be black and white ink. Right? And then so we'll put a little bit of black ink in this image now just to give it some highlights. So I'm mixing and matching at this point again. And the reason that I'm doing so is really because of the fact that, well, you can't use ink with acrylic paint. I've heard somebody say that you got to use specific tools in specific ways, and I purely disagree. I think you got to use whatever you're using in whatever way you want to use it, and that's it. There's no. I was at a show the end of the year last year, and there's people talking about this sort of purist aesthetic of course I have to use these materials, and of course you have to work in a certain kind of way. And I thought, well, you do you, but I was kind of disappointed that they're putting on this younger creator beside them, because a kid can't afford this expensive crap this person's using. And I think that that's kind of unfair. This is the way you tell a story. This is the way you do a painting. This is the way putting away decorations. Just got some lunch from the kitchen. Nice. If it works and it creates the effect you want, there's no rule or law to say you can't. I love it. That's exactly it, Philip. There's an absolute truth to that. And anybody that tries to give you that governance otherwise, smile and nod at them nicely. Just give a nice little smile and nod. That's all you can do. You can't help them much more than that, right? So again, we've got some of this palette knife stuff going on here. I can try to put some little bits of black in and on that as well, just to build up some of those little surfaces. Again, with a knife, there's so many different things that you can do with different parts of the knife, that you can put little punches and noodles here and there, and it's just it's basically using a stick. It's basically like drawing with a stick that's got a flattened side, but it does the job. It works. Either way, it's about exploring and playing. So right, okay, mark that. So okay, so here we go. This is some of that crayon effect I showed you on the other page, and you can see how lightly it comes in, right? Barely there. But what it's great for is putting marks down on the paper, and because crayon can work as a resist, if you try to go in over crayon in a very wet effect on top of it, it'll ball up, it'll disperse. Even if two mediums don't work together, it might create a unique effect that might surprise you. That's exactly what I'm doing here. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. So you've got this, and I would press firmly. when I'm doing that, just so I know that there's a good level of wax and resist from the crayon, so that when I come in, give me a second, please, with this white drop of value over top, it's going to mottle around, mottle, M-O-T-T-L-E, around the crayon, and you're going to get these wonderful little lines, and hopefully those will turn up in a second. Like hopefully you'll see that in the camera, how there's a separation around the wax as the pigment is spreading itself out in the contours of the water that I've applied it with. At the same time, it can't go over top of the wax, so you're going to have some fun little effects. The more and more you do this on top of itself, the more and more you're going to see of this little spreading out and spacing out of it. But if you use, there are blending stumps and blending, like, so this is a white crayon. I have a blending one of these as well that's clear, and it works exactly as that sounds. It works really as a resist. So this is wax resist with wet, washed out acrylic laid over it. And, you know, you could do that. You're going to need to do that a few times for it to have any real hold to it. But, you know, we can do that. We have the technologies. That might have been too much. Well, we'll see how it goes. All right. The bottom left is almost a space eye. Ooh, cool. Yeah, cool. Why not? I think that's too much. Too much pigment, not enough water. So, but I like the spotting. I like the different things that you get in from placing stuff down onto that surface. This is a leadless pencil crayon, so they're kind of nice. They work pretty well as your standard pencil crayon, but there's just something about that lack of lead in there. Whoops-a-daisy, that lets you play with them. It's sort of like, it feels like you're drawing with a Conte, but it gets you. It's far less chalky, far less messy and disruptive, but it lets you get a kind of a grainy thing going on as you're working with it. So, but I find that there tends to be more wax in these leadless pencil crayons, so that it does the same thing again. It works kind of like a resist, you know, and that's not half bad. That's not, so that's, what was that? Leadless. Pencil crayon. And we'll play with this a little bit in a second. So we've got a pre-stamped surface, black and white. Brushwork on top. So let's finish this guy off now that black should have dried to some extent. I'm not entirely sure how light fast this ink is, but we're going to play a little bit and see what we get out of it. We're just going to take this overly stamped surface, far more modulated than a symbolic stamp above, like we have with the Conte, and then we're going to throw some of this down so that while you'll see the stamps come through, it's not integral to. It's not a symbolic stamp. And what I mean by a symbolic stamp is, if you've got a stamp that looks just like the fleur-de-lis, well, a lot of people's eyes will try to pull out that pattern. But if you've got that thing over and over again, now, you know, you can start to develop things so that people think it looks like a butterfly or some such. Prismacolor used to make woodless color sticks that were great for coloring caricatures, but they discontinued them. I still have some of those. I've got a couple of those right now, and I love them. Right, that's one of those things where you get a hold of something like that, and you just sort of treasure it, and keep it. There's definitely something to those. They're kind of nice. Really good flow to them. Okay, so there's same eye as we've been doing before, but now it's starting to pull out of this sort of almost like a mandalic thing. It's almost like you can start to pull out imagery or look at it like it's butterfly wings, and this sort of opens up your mind to imagining little details in your background and start to do things creatively and abstractly that I don't know of anyone else them, at least not as good. Core made something like them, but I thought they were terrible. I don't think I ever tried the Core ones, but yeah, once you find your thing. Leadless pencil crayon. This is a dollar store. It's so, like I said before, it's kind of a hard lead to it. So you can see how it hasn't got a lot of teeth, and it's sort of, it keeps its point because the lead is so much harder than like a Laurentian or a Prismacolor or something like that. So it tends to be kind of like you're drawing with an H pencil. Try not to be too elaborate in pencil crayon or any of these little things that I'm drawing. I'm trying to just spin them down fast and quick, and let's get on and try the next one. So this is a hard lead pencil crayon, and I don't know if you can tell the soft edge or the hard edge in the camera or not. So but there's something to be said for taking that opportunity to then go put a dot in the eye with an ink or something like that over top, to build up and add into your image that way. There's don't just stay static, of course, but top right looks a bit like a raccoon face from a distance. Oh, that's cool. That's a fun, it kind of does, doesn't it? That's kind of fun. So another thing that I tend to do when I'm working with Conte, graphite, or pencil crayon is that I'll use well, here comes Corbin. I'll use one of these things as a smudging tool. It's just some gauze wrapped around a palette knife. So if I'm using, this is a chalk pastel that I've got here, and like Philip was saying earlier, this is a Lamo, really dirty, dusty, messy kind of a thing. Now you can get all kinds of stuff out of it, but I find it to be really, really rough to work with, just to do the same sort of image as we've done with other things. So using the palette knife gauze, I'll flatten that down a little bit. This is not in any way a medium that I prefer. I think that it's rough and it smudges out, and if you don't have a fine point on your chalk where you can cut those fine lines, it's hard to be tightly detailed with chalk unless you're working large, I think. Maybe that's just me, but pastels, yes. Chalk pastels, yes, but chalk in and of itself. Now, I think it's a chunky, sloppy kind of a mess. I don't even mind chalk pastels. I used to do animal portraits with them, but black charcoal just frustrated me. Understandable. So, what did I say? That's white chalk. So you can get details, but you're not going to you're going to have to go over and go over and go over. And ideally, there's blending. And I'm not getting into blending right now. But ideally, there's blending involved, and then there's developing things up further with how you go about putting your surfaces down. And there's certain things that you get as a benefit from using chalk and pastel and Conte that you don't get from other things, like the wonderful free-flowing marks that you get from things like that. You can use different approaches to it. Like, sorry, just give me a second. I got too many things in my hand again. Do that a lot. Okay, so if I take this Conte here, I'm going to move the image up a little bit because we're starting to move down here a little bit. But if I look at, so I'm drawing this Conte. Now I've got it on its pointed side, and I'm going to switch the different corners as I go. And I'm going to use the flats, the flat side, the flat bottom. You know, I'm just playing with the idea of the image and how with Conte, I can really just knock it out really quick and fast and loose and not get too caught up in a lot of the monkeying around. And it's just, again, you can interpret the same image again, but because you're, you know, trying some different things and working some different ways with it, and then you can come in over it again and put in some tighter lines, and there's just so much fun to be had with it. But again, it's a bit of monkeying about, and it's something that really needs a little bit of time and practice in order to figure out, you know, in some kind of way that sort of says, yeah, I got a handle on this and I want to try to pursue that a little more. All right, so now I had a white ink kicking around. So there's your multicolored Conte. Give me a second here while I try to set this someplace where it's not going to spill all over the place. All right. Excuse me a second, I missed a comment here. Philippa said, my old life drawing teacher from Sheridan hated blending or any kind of smudging. She insisted that we use to learn the tool correctly to create gradation. That teacher sounds like fun in the sun. Yeah, she's probably one of those purists that say it has to be done this way. And those are the kinds of teachers that make people stop making art. There's such a thing as, you know, there's methods and approaches that are tried and true, and people do those over and over again. But that's not, yeah, I got a problem with the correct way. She sounds like a bundle of joy. There's been some videos of different teachers at Sheridan in Toronto and different little glory videos about this art teacher who goes and draws the same bridge every day, and it's like, you know, that's fine, but you know, and he grills his students on this is the way you need to work with this, with pencils and citing and measuring, and it's like, there are absolutes that, you know, and foundations about, you know, how we draw or what we draw, but then there's other things that are like, if you don't let people do it their own way. She's an old Hungarian woman who was definitely a purist. Yeah. I think that if you don't allow people to find new ways of doing things, everything's going to be static. And we're going to miss out on some stuff. So this is a dipping pen that I'm just, you know, so you can see, even if you're using different tools and different media, I still draw like me. You know, I think that the person's hand that's doing the image, that's doing the work, that still comes through, and well, it should. You know, like there's nothing wrong with that. It's just what it is. You know, but using the different tools and using them in different ways are going to yield different results. You know, and when you start using things in combination with other pieces, like with other materials, you're automatically going to get the different approaches. It's just how it is, right? What is this? I don't know what other people call this. I've always called these dipping pens, but I'm sure other people, there's a proper name for everything, but I kind of, being pretty largely self-taught, I call things whatever the hell I call them. So bear with me. If I got enough, if anything in there, flick it around, maybe not. Oh yeah, let's do that first before I forget. I got a little bit of space here. Okay, toothbrush. So this is one of the reasons that I like this denture toothbrush as opposed to a regular toothbrush, is that a denture toothbrush has this little edge that can be dipped into an inkwell. And so then when you're flicking it onto a surface, like so, I'm going to smudge that out so that you don't have everything with a dip or with a flicking on it. So when you dip it into the inkwell, and it fits in nicely into the neck of the bottle. And yeah, that's not half bad. So I'll also do this where as I'm flicking it down, I'll use my hand to keep it from going on top of everything. And if you quickly get it up and it's muted enough, you're not going to stain everything in that color, in that ink. I'm not too messy right now. It's not half bad. I can get messy at this, that's for sure. So there's toothbrush spatter. And again, this is sort of a way of modulating the surface again. I'm going to leave that to dry for a second, and then we're going to go over it in something else in a moment. I had, give me a sec. There we go. So a little bit of this before I get too far. This is medical tape. I talked about this yesterday. And medical tape is a fun little thing to put on your surface. Now, medical tape tears pretty easily, but it has a wonderful fibrous texture. So as you put it on there, on your paper or on your surface or whatever it's going onto, and try to get down as much as you can, and so that when you put this in your surface and you modulate it that way, when you go over top of that, oh, it's charcoal, I still got to do charcoal. When you go over top of that as you're drawing or painting or whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to get that fibrous texture kicking through. So I'm going to come in with, I should have put a few different pieces down. So here is a wax crayon. Okay, and all the wax crayon really does is soften out, and it pushes into that surface of the image. So as I throw this image in here again, as we've done numerous times before, you can see how it's really muted, but I like it. And then you can of course add other medium in there as well. So there's how that does with wax crayon. And then I'm going to play around the surface with this white crayon so that this is the other part I wanted to get into today. I will go through an image and I will do both positive and negative over a surface with the modulated surface. And the reason that I do that is A, I'm a wacko, and B, I like opportunities that it affords me because of different things going through different medium, overlapping and interacting with one another. So that's why it's kind of fun Now, unfortunately, because I chose the crayon for this one, it doesn't really show through very well. Let me come through on this guy. I'm going to put this aside. Grab a black pencil. Move my cloth here. And here we go. There's a black pencil. I call him Charlie. So I'm going to do the same thing with this black pencil on the same surface, this tape. And the pencil crayon shows through much better. And it really, but again, you're going to see the same thing where the marks that you make on the surface of this paper is, how would I express this? They show there's a tooth to them now because you're kind of pushing into, because of the nature of the paper and for the mark and for the value to stay in there, you're kind of etching it into the tape, into the medical tape. But when you go over this with different medium, it starts to punch through. It starts to, how do I say this? It starts to, because you've got these crevices and stuff in the surface of your tape, it's going to do fun little things. So there's a whole bunch of different avenues that you can pursue this way. But this is just taking these pencil crayons and throwing them down on the surface. And of course, with the pencil crayon, the more and more you go over the white, the better it's going to turn out. But there's drawings that I've done. There's a 4-foot by 6-foot drawing in our house that I drew in white pencil. And often people think I painted it, but it's just layers and layers of white pencil. So you can get different kinds of effects. So that's white. Did anybody get my joke yesterday for underneath the screen? Today it says black and white, but yesterday it said objectivism. Did anybody get that joke yesterday or not? I'd be curious to hear if anyone did. It's pretty on the nose at this point, I would think. Well, that's not turning out too well. There we go. Red tape, black and white pencil crayon over red tape. Okay, so there's our toothbrush spatter is dried out. Dipping pen, white ink. And so I'm sort of sticking to just using things in and of themselves and not making too many complicated combinations together here. So my joke yesterday, it said objectivism underneath the surface, I guess right here, underneath where my finger is pointing to right now. And the reason that I made that reference is that objectivism as a psychological viewpoint, as proposed by Ayn Rand, is that things are black or white. There's no gray. There's no intermediate. If you're a convict for prison, then you're always a convict. There's no such thing as being an ex-convict because you were once a convicted man. It's pretty brutalist in its assessment of things being absolutes. It's like absolutism, but it's called objectivism. It's just objectifying a thing in a set state. So that was my joke yesterday as I'm showing all these examples in black and white. It's my objectivist drawing platform. Anyways, just because I'm only using black and white, I'm not using color for any of these things. It's complicated enough, right? Okay, so because I've got these different approaches and different styles here with this tape, I'm going to show you if you use your standard painting tape, your masking tape, and I put these in drawings and paintings a lot, you probably will see that through work I do over time. So in this case, and I'll put one here, and we'll use that fella, and I'm going to put one up here, and we'll use that fella in a moment, just because I want to get as many eyes on a half of a piece of paper as I can. Okay, and then we're going to switch to the opposite. We're going to go to the whites in a second. Okay, so because I've got these guys down there here now, oh, white charcoal. I'm sorry. Just a second as I'm grabbing that. Messy as sin, white charcoal. So if I'm doing a drawing in that, I'm doing this really tight. This is a nice hard piece of white charcoal, and then I'm going to use a pencil version of it in a second too. Now I've put it down onto the surface, and I'm pretty sure X amount of it's going to blow away in just a moment, but so I'm tamping it down to try to keep as much of it here as I can. But I like using a really hard charcoal because it works just like a Conte. I don't actually own any soft white charcoal because it's pointless. It's another way of looking at how to just dirty a piece of paper or whatever your surface is that you're working on. So I use this really hard stuff, which really does. You can see it's bigger and thicker than regular Conte, but it's a very similar consistency to it. Like this is a piece of Conte, which you can see is so much smaller and harder and sharper than the big, fat, thick charcoal. And I'm just going to set that over there. And my fingers are absolutely covered in the crap. So that's a challenge that I have with working with those. But, you get different effects. I'm not going to get too much into that with blending and layering and all that sort of stuff because we really are just working with white marks on a black surface. This is a blending. Okay, this is a colorless blender, a wax colorless blender. So it works as a resist. So if I put these marks down, and you're not going to see these unless you see a little glossy what now on the surface of the paper. Okay, and so as I put these marks with this colorless blender, okay, I hope this works. I hope this is going to take, because sometimes these don't take when we try to do this. But give me one second. I'm not going to do it with acrylic. I'm going to use, where did I put the white ink? There it is. I'm going to use this ink. So right here, I have colorless blender. And as I'm loading up this little brush, and I'm going to just wash over the ink. Now, ideally, if it's wet enough, or if it's got it worked out enough, it should separate. It doesn't always work. I find that if you're going to use this, I find that these tools aren't as reliable to me as other people claim them to be. So I tend to prefer to use a resist. And resist is an art masking fluid is what it's also called. Okay, and this is a watercolor tool. You paint this on in the areas that you don't want the color to go into. And so I would paint the eye in the reverse, in the negative, and then I would do a wash over it. But I'm not getting into that right now. So, so it's a colorless blending tool, and it doesn't work. It just tends not to work. I find that I bought 2 of these at the time, and the 2 of them are in beautiful shape, and they suck because they don't really work. The only thing that they're really any good for is as a resist, it doesn't work. Like a wax resist, it doesn't work. But where it does work is that it really does work as a nice blending tool, so that we can go into like a pastel, we can go into a chalk, and we can push those marks around on our surface and truly use it as a blending tool to blend those in. So I'm just going to put, so this is the colorless blending tool used. And so I'll show you that you can get some of these textural marks. And I don't know if that's picking up. I've done gesticular marks like this across the white eye. And so it's moved that pigment into the surface of it. It's just pushed it down. And so you can get some cool effects out of it. It just takes some trial and error, but it works in that regard. You know, let's see if I can get it. So if I go over softly, it starts to, let me see, I'll go up here into the chalk. So if I go over softly, it tones it down, it mutes it down. But it doesn't, what it doesn't do is with a blending, like a blending, rolled up piece of blending paper, it'll actually pick up pigment from many of these different medium, like Conte, like chalk, pastel, like charcoal. It'll pick it up on that paper so that as you make different marks on the same place with that rolled up paper for your pencil, it actually spreads it around. You can actually use it as its own drawing tool, as a sort of intermediate value, because if it's whether it's white or it's black, it pulls gray, right? But this doesn't. It doesn't pick anything up. So there could be some real benefits for it if you think outside the box with it. Yeah. Okay, so I've got white tape down, and just to be quick, I'm just going to draw this eye down with this, what is it called? I'm so sorry. Fudenosuke. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. In fact, I'm pretty sure of it. But as Philip said, oh, you used to have some of that. Are you talking about the resist, or are you talking about the blending stumps? And what results did you get out of either of those? And did you find that used to means that you didn't see much purpose into keeping that? Okay, so this is just drawing on top of the masking tape with the Fudenosuke brush pen, and using the various shapes and tips of it. You got the side of the brush, you got the tip of the brush, that you can get some pretty fun different courses of line. I'm curious to see, now there's John J. Muth is a fantastic contemporary artist who's done some comic book work he's done some pieces in Sandman. He's done an absolutely gorgeously illustrated interpretation of the film M by Fritz Lang, and he's done that in charcoals. My goodness, you should take a look at this. Look it up, okay? Even if you just do a search online, John, J-O-N-J, M-U-T-H, and look at his M work. It's just phenomenal. And he illustrated a 3 prestige issue graphic storytelling of the Fritz Lang film about a child murderer, and how the city rallies against this person, finding him and having him eliminated by the criminal element of the city. You had some resist. Philip says he had some resist. Didn't use it much, and I think it dried or went bad. Now, I got this guy still good, but it's yellowed for sure. But I find the yellowing actually makes it easier to see. It was a long time ago. Yeah, resist is one of those things that tends not to hold on. Black Fudenosuke on tape. And then, whoops, I smudged that charcoal one. Oh, good job, me. Okay, so now with the black Fudenosuke thing on tape, you can also, using that tape as your muted base color, you can then go in with your whites and your black and just do accents. It's pretty liberating to be able to pursue opportunities in image making that you're offered by the surface modulation, by things. I remember watching M at Beal Art and Film class. Did you? I never did. That would have been cool. That's a pretty hardcore film. Yeah, I had to purposely pursue that film to find it. With white pen. So here's a bunch of different approaches and methods that we're using again into interpreting different things. Now, I did white crayon, okay, here. With wash and pen. So I'm going to just play with this for a second. So I've got this wash, so it's sort of muted out and flattened out. You're not going to get an awful lot of purchase for the ink. So I tend to just do a little highlighting sometimes like this. And you can get some cool little textures and way of drawing that you don't normally do because you're incorporating two different elements, right? So this is the leadless pencil crayon. And so I'm going to go over that again. Where are you? There you are. It's hiding on me. Can you believe that? Seeing if it's going to make any more. No, it's not doing anything more deep. It's, again, like I said, it's very waxy. So when you try to go over top, you try to layer over top, it just removes itself away. So I'm going to make a note there. Very waxy, hard to layer. So exploring these different things tells us different insights and tells us different perspectives on how the things interact and engage with each other. So I've got this white tape here. Okay, so now I'm going to go into, this is a hard charcoal pencil. So this is just like the white charcoal stick that I showed you a second ago. So it doesn't have a lot of dust. It doesn't have a lot of the mess, right? I've done the same thing again. I've done this twice where I start drawing the opposite, which is not my intent. All right, so we're going to push this line here, push it through there. So this is this hard charcoal, and it really just sort of works, and I'll do that over here on the white. But the hard charcoal, it's just like it's got the darkness of B-class pencils without any of the mess. So they're kind of nice, but I find that there's too much pressure involved in them, and it makes it, I don't know, I feel like it slows down a little bit, I don't know if that makes sense for people, but, and it smudges a little bit more, but I need I have a pen. I'll just use the Funosuke. Funosuke! Some black charcoal pencil. All right. Woohoo! Now there's also a heavier version of that. Now this is Curry's. Curry's is an art store that used to be in London and is in different places in Canada. It is no longer in London, so I don't know. COVID was rough on a lot of places, specifically art supply stores. Now, going over the existing pencils, right? But when you go and lay it down on its own, it comes in much nicer and much darker. And that's kind of fun because it's actually, because it's a B, it just I don't know what it is about it. It just seems to have this beautiful, crisp line that you're not going to get out of drawing with a charcoal stick. And especially, so here we go. This is a soft charcoal. And when we try to do the same thing, I'm being very reserved in how I go about doing it. Man, you get that really lovely black. But it's a game. It's a sort of game about how hard a mark are you going to make, you know. But there's all kinds of things. I'm trying to be really reserved with my space, but there's all kinds of things that we can do with charcoal. Let me try something like this. Try not to make a gigantic mess. All right, I'm going to rough a really sloppy version in, okay? And this is something I should do in the white one as well. All right, so now I'm going to smash that in a little bit there, and this is where I'll do a second, yet one more, where I put it in, and I'm going to bludgeon it out first, like so. Okay. Now, erasers. So there's different things that we can pull back out again using an eraser as a drawing tool, that we can take out marks that we put into a surface. Is this in camera or am I? Okay, sorry. So using this standard black little eraser, I'm pulling out marks back out of it, and I'm working in the opposite that. And that's the beauty of charcoals and contes, is that we can do that so that we can work positive, negative. Let me get charcoal B stick or B pencil. Charcoal B pencil erased, an eraser. And it's not too elaborate, but it's B pencil, and I call it bludgeoning. I don't know. I don't know what other people call it. Blending, mixing, stamping, whatever. But that tends to work pretty nicely when you've got a larger surface drawing and you're throwing in some different chops. And of course, the more, and using the sharp edges of your eraser, you use the big fat round edges of your eraser, you can do dragging of the material. Let's see if I can get, yeah, see you can do a little bit of pulling like that. And you want to keep your eraser clean. So there's, again, a million different things for us to try. This is a kneadable eraser, and kneadable erasers, because you can mold them into whatever we need them to be, they're pretty great for getting in there and doing really sharp little lines and pulling out nice little details in our images. So I tend to like this guy a lot when it comes to stuff like that. But again, experimentation is king. So this wasn't a pencil. This was the charcoal stick, and this was the pencil. All right. So again, that's a black hard and a black soft. So you can see the difference in depth of the black line because of whether or not it's a soft or a hard pencil. And there's different brands, and they all have their own benefits. They all have their own pluses and negatives, but it's just a case of experimentation again. This is a leadless pencil, and because of the length, it's similar to of the amount of lead that you get exposed to it. It's similar to when you sharpen a pencil in this way, that these things are naturally set to. So when you work with these fat cats, you get that wonderful edged line to it. You can go in rough. You can just chop at shapes with it, and come in fast and dirty and loose. And of course, come in with one of your erasers and cut back into those marks that you've put down, and start to define a little better the form of the surface you're doing. That's just using it on its side. Of course, you can also still use it on its tip, pull out some fun details. But they're usually a really soft, they're a really B-grade pencil. Into, I would suggest, say, 4B, 5B, something of that regard. Similar to, I'm going to try to keep my notes going here. Leadless B pencil. All right, and then now we've got, this is a 4B, an H, and a 5B. So 5B pencils, even though it's sharpened, so if I look at the 5B pencil, it's got that sort of really nice dark application of value onto the surface. But I find that I tend not to go into the B range when I'm drawing because they smudge a lot. And if you're doing graphite work, I commend you, because there's a lot to be said about the fact that it's very easy to schmaltz up your surface with. So I'm trying different levels of pressure to show you the wonderful gradation you get when you use just your B pencil. And you can get some beautiful little textures. I think that's a 5B I just used. So you can get some wonderful little textures. Now, when you use that HB, is this him? No, this is him. In the same regard, it's just this standard uniform. There's your sharp, really sharp line of the H, which is fine, which is good. It's just boring. But when you put that into other things, like when you go into the tape with that, it becomes more like a silver point drawing. If you lay tape over a surface and then you come at that tape with an H pencil and do your entire drawing, you can then take a wash over top of it, and because of all that edging that you've done, or run over the surface with another mark making tool, you'll see that really pop through. You'll see the graphite really stick through that, because the H is really dug its heels in there. And as you've done a Conte brushing over of your surface, then all of those things that you've edged in, it sort of works like a litho, I guess, in that regard. So that's H pencil, Conte layer over top. So it leaves all those little crevices filled with the pencil and all the little surfaces filled with the Conte. And again, that's something that you can put all kinds of emphasis into your drawings with. So it's just more and more playing and more pursuing different avenues on how we can really get in there and really show some different ways of applying ourselves to the same things. Let's see, what do I got? I've got Conte. I don't know if I've done. No, that's all charcoal stuff. Conte I like more than I like charcoal, because Conte has this kind of lovely. It has the black, but Conte lets, for some reason, me feel like there's a little bit more control with it, and so that you can get some nicer grays in there with some grain to them. And of course you can do some smudging or that around, get a little bit of difference going in here into the surface. And of course you can come in with one of our old trusty erasers and cut some nice sharp little lines in there, just as you do with the charcoal. It's just I feel like that there's just a little bit more control in it, less of the dust that the charcoal has. So, Black Conte, eraser. Yeah. But again, this is me falling back on, if I just work with the one, I'm not going to, the one material, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as opposed to when I work with multiple materials over top of each other. Here is a graphite stick, which is great for doing some life drawing if you're just doing really fast gestural work. But I think that when it comes to doing actual timed drawings, maybe you want to switch to something else, because this is just a little too restricting in my opinion, because it just comes off as being just a little flat and boring. I find that it's an HB, I think, at best. 4B. This is supposed to be a 4B. Wow, it's a terrible 4B. Because it sure as heck doesn't feel like a 4B. You can see how I'm pressing down on the surface of it. Yeah, so clearly, I tend not, look how brand new that still looks. This is thing, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. Clearly, I don't enjoy using that, and I don't get much out of it. I think it's easier to go into the pencils, or to just not monkey around with something like that, unless you're just doing big, sweepy gestural stuff on manila and throw it to the floor and move on with your life. So this is a 4B lead. Can't believe that. Drawing stick, graphite stick, let's call it. All right, so I've got these little stamps that I've put down earlier, and I think that I tried different things on it. I think I'm going to play a little bit in the same way as I did on the black, as I'm going to do now on the white. And there's something about, you've got that ink and you've laid it down, you've stamped it onto the page, and so now it's literally a case of going in and painting over its surface and exploring, trying to find a way to get some stuff out of it. That's, or you can do this. Here's another fun thing I like to do, is that I'll take something like that and I'll just smush over it for a minute with the color. I'll just sort of little splotchy bits of white, or black, dependingly, right? And it just chunks it up a little bit, in the sense that it's not just this nice flat stayed printed image. It's got little different bits. I tend to use a lot of different colors when I'm working, and so when I'm doing stuff like this, I'm never really going to show some of the things that some of the effects that I'm going to push, because those effects I'll push with value into the surface. So where was I? I think I was here, and there's just roughing that white into the surface. It's probably would have been easier to start with the black. But yeah, there we are. So just working straight over top of the printed image gives us the ability to have some fun details. Now I've got white paint and black ink on the same spot to really, and this is the sort of thing where you'll end up doing some degree of layering. But just because I like how these things are smashing into each other, not really blending too well. I'll come back in a minute for that. Just let that part dry and I'll jump on it again. Exciting stuff. There's okay, the star field we got down here below the bottom. All I was going to do with that was to paint with the brush here a little eye in the star field sort of start pulling the prepared background surface. But what it allows it to, this is a sort of thing that you can do, and what it allows it to do by pre-establishing the star field first instead of trying to do it after the fact. I don't know, for me that works better than the opposite way around, because now it sort of looks like the eye is floating in this field of stars. And when I try to do it the other way around, it feels kind of like an after the thought notion of it, and it just doesn't blend as well. And then I'll go over top that same area with the black, and I'll flick some black into it over the eye as well. So now it's really sort of, you got black spots where the white is and white spots where the black is, and I suppose you can work one way or the other, but because I started on a black piece of paper, I started with the white. So I do this thing where I'm doing an iris where I'll paint the surface of the iris, but then I'll always do like a nice little tiny line around, when I'm painting the eye, around the iris itself, because it just makes that sense of surface round out a little bit. I don't know if anybody else finds that or not, but I think that when you have, like if you have your eye here, okay, and there's a flat white. Okay, and so we'll give that a second. And then I'll just go around the iris and I'll put a little bit of value there. It just sort of punches that focus, I find, onto the eye itself. And if I'm going to do any of the lines around, I'm not remembering any names right now for eyes, and I'm terribly sorry for that, but yeah, there you go. So there's the other thing you can do with when you're painting. If you want to tone it down, just take it off with your fingertip, and then you can go over the same spot again, put some more value down, but it just allows you a little bit more control. Anyhow, by doing this little white line, and one more time, it just sort of gives it a little something more, makes that eye pop out a little bit more. So I hope that came out in the camera. Anyhow, oh, my cat baby came to join me. Cleared. It's all this junk. Gross. Get out of here. Get your terrible comments. Anyhow, so this is, what did I put this on with? I think that's graphite stick over tape, white masking tape. So you can see all these different things that we've got happening now, that very different effects, very much more soft and chunky effects, as opposed to a lot of the hard and rigid effects that you get specifically with the different pencils. And I'm using things together more here than I did on the previous page, and it has a lot to do with just pushing and pulling things around a little bit. This is kind of a scratchy white ink sort of way of putting in some of these details onto this image here. And you're going to get that rigid line, that little black line in between the white line, the thicker that the size of the pen is, the size of the white pen. It's just how it is. So 5s is a really tight line, but it's not as bright, so you're going to have to go over that surface a few times. Yeah, I should have kept more black pens and the like out. Okay, so I'll just be tight and sparing with the, because it's such a crisp black in these Vanilla CQ pens. I like them a lot. I like them. I like them a lot. So, but you can use this surface disruption from these stamps to just monkey around with their surface, and it just gives everything so much texture. Oops, trying to write on black with black. So that's white and black pen on, this disrupted surface. Yeah, well, that doesn't show up. So, all right. Yeah, let's play spatter base acrylic white pen. Let's just, again, like we've been doing, add our little spin to that, so that if we put some of these marks here, just to enhance some of these little lines and separations, it no longer has a star field bit, but now it has its own, that crosshatchy business that goes on, just gives it its own different style to it. And it's not just the materials we're using, it's the way that we're using them. So I could do this for days of just monkeying around with surfaces and monkeying around with how I go about them. What am I missing? Okay, black electrical tape. Now I'm going to put some on both sides. I hate how black electrical tape is so adamant not to let you peel it back. Just doesn't want to work with me. All right, so here we go. Skizzers. One of my many stupid names for things. Skizzers. So, so I'm going to put a piece of black electrical tape on here. Magical. And I'm going to put a piece of black electrical tape on here. And it's a good start. So, the black electrical tape, I don't know if in let me move this down. Okay, so here is, sorry, the black electrical tape here and here, and I don't know if it picks up in camera well enough or not. The difference of the construction paper that is here, this heavy cardstock that I'm using, from the flat and very smooth, very crisply black surface of the tape, so that when I come in with this brush and I try to uniformly apply some paint over the two surfaces. Now I'm going into the other one. It's just a little bit like, anyways, you're going to see a lot of it right here. So when I'm doing this, this is a really big thing that I have in a lot of my images. I love incorporating modified surfaces into my drawings and paintings, because now I don't know if it's picking up or not, but there's a clean outline that appears from the different surface, the tape. There's a pooling of the paint along these edges of the tape itself, and so as it dries, it's going to be nice and crisply there. And I really kind of like that. I always have. I've been doing it since, well, I don't know. I've been doing it all these years, where I put tape into drawings and paintings. And on the YouTube channel here, there is a bunch of pages now. I've changed the content page for my YouTube channel so that you can see older videos a lot easier. There's playlists there, and there's a playlist for some of the one-page comic extravaganza stuff. And so you'll see how some of these things have these modified surfaces in there, and as I'm going about putting those together. So, you know, it's just that fact that it does that, the fact that it does these separations in this way is really great to me. And I would really encourage you to play with that and to see what that gives you in the regard of how that can contribute to your drawing. Because you see now as it's drying, because I came on it pretty wet, there's this pooling that happens. So it's much like when you put a drop of water on a surface, the pigment will dry to the outside edges of it. The more water that is in that, the more of a bubble there is on that surface, the pigment dries around those outside edges. But in this case, it tends to be in the center of those pools, which is kind of fun and cool. So electric tape, white paint, electric tape and paper, white paint. So that one's fun. And please try things like that. See what that gives you. Now over on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to shift all of this over now at this point. You've had plenty of opportunity to see the first one, the first page that I did, but I'm going to shift on over here. If I come at this guy with the black ink, and then this brush here, and so as I'm pulling these marks around it, there it is. And I've been doing pretty black and white applications of stuff. Let's play a little bit more with our, let's use the ink. Let's go with our gray tones and shift our values around and have some fun. Philip's off for work. Well, have a great time at work today, Philip. I think I'm going to wrap up this soon. I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but I'm hitting my time. So, yeah, I'll be doing some more. I don't know if I'll be doing more of these. Probably. Who are we kidding? But, yeah, that's the ink moving over top of the surface. So here again, you'll see as I'm trying to do this a little more dry than the other one. Have a good day, Philip. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to see less of this pooling like I did here. Wet, dry. So we'll see how this turns out, except for the center section. I don't know if you can see that it's still wet in here in the center, but we'll give this guy a minute, see how he comes together. All right. And again, I'm trying to remember to write things down as I go. Ink over paper and electric tape. Woohoo! Number one. Okay, so I don't want to repeat stuff, though. That's the challenge. That's the trick, is not to repeat things. All right, where am I at? Let's do, okay, so we've got our stamped image. That's what I was going to go back and do. I don't know where I just put that little brush I had. There he is. Okay, so the little stamped image that we had here, and we put some paint down and then some ink on top. Well, I'm just going to come in, there's a lot more ink there, and throw down some more mark making on this thing so it starts to pull out a little bit more. But it's got all of this kind of nice blended texture into it now. So it's a very different way of approaching it as opposed to where this. as when you've got your surface and it has this chaoticness to it, then you can find all kinds of different things to pull out of it. That's just me. A couple more minutes. So now I'm going to go into this dry brush ink, which that is not. Okay. Still wet. Anyways. But please look at artists like John J. Muth and see the way that he approaches ink and the way that he approaches charcoal. This is a person who clearly has a very formal art education, and it shows, and he's very good. He's very adept at what it is that he's doing. Doing a playing around thing like this is only so good as you're going to find something in here that you're going to use. This is absolutely pointless if you're not going to do something with this, because you could just do these until the cows come home. What's the point of that? I mean, the whole idea is to find different little ways of making marks that you can incorporate into your work. And that's black ink over stamp. This is a 5B pencil. That is a H pencil. There's your standard I'm not drawing the extensive eye as I did before, just because I'm trying to expedite as many examples as I can. See, more of this crap. How does this stuff get through onto... Hi, Frank. Okay. Frank came to say hello. Over stamp. So they're just trying to keep track of all this stuff again. Okay, so this guy has pretty almost dried. There's a little spot left on it. And then I'm going to come in with the white and show you this difference, the separations of that. Did that junk finally disappear? Do both of this person. Anyways, okay, so Frank has come by to say hello. I am crap? What? You are not crap. No, the crap is the Sofia Belova adult material nonsense. So I've had to block that junk because yuck. All right, so not my bag, not my interest. So there we go. So we've got a bunch of these different examples, and we're seeing a lot more of these little things come into play over here. I can keep doing the same stuff over and over again for an example, but I think you get the gist of it. There is just so many different ways that we can modify our surfaces and play with those and monkey about with making materials interact with each other and presenting ourselves with different opportunities and options on some of these more complex and different things that we can do to modify the surface so that whenever we're working on whatever it is that we're doing, we've truly explored some of these different avenues to say, hey, some of these different approaches is something that I can incorporate into the work that I'm doing. And there's no right or wrong method to it. There's no, you can use certain methods or materials in certain ways, but there's no hard and fast rule that says you have to. It's entirely up to you creatively as an individual to pursue and explore things in any way. I can do some more things tomorrow where I'll show you other different ways that we can monkey with the surface of the paper, so that whatever it is that we're doing with our images has an awful lot to say about just exploring the different things that are presented to us by interfering with that surface, like flicking the little bit of water surface that I did there, and now right beside it I'm going to flick some ink here, get my finger good and messy. So, and we'll explore that too. There's just so many different things that we can do, and so many different ways that we can play, but you're never going to find those things unless you just go for it. Frank says he likes using different types of paper to get interesting textures and effect. I find that using a poster style cardstock gives you a watercolor effect when you draw on it with alcohol markers. Alcohol markers is something I forgot to pull out. Hey, thanks for reminding me, Frank. Yeah, alcohol markers are great, but they've got that nice clean line to it, but I find that they have this weird kind of spreading and saturating of the marks that you put down around the edges of them, because that it's sort of absorbing and spreading out. I tend not to use them a lot for that. I've got some. I tend not to use them. It's alcohol-based marker. Thank you for reminding me. Overstamp. So yeah, there's definitely benefits to that. Of course, there's no white in alcohol markers. There's no because how do you I've never seen it. Pardon me. Pardon my yawning. I apologize. I've never seen it. Anyways, maybe there is, and I just haven't come across it as yet. But yeah, it works pretty well. Okay, so the electrical tape. I'm gonna show you something different. This is Conte over the electrical tape, and it does this really weird, almost staticky kind of separation of it sort of feels like data stuff. I sort of, you know what I mean, in the sense that it feels like it's digitized information when you put it over top of the electric tape, because it's so granulated that it separates so that it doesn't actually look like proper Conte. But again, play with this, suckers. Play and explore. White Conte. White Conte. Yeah, and then the other thing that I did earlier with the masking tape, same thing applies on a white surface where you put masking tape down and then you try to draw over top of that. In this case, I use a pencil crayon, and it actually works fairly well, just because you don't have to work it as hard to get it to sit off the surface, but you can get that really fun texture in there. And any of those chances, any of those opportunities to find those things, yes please, sign me up. I'm in. But when you go off the sides, so as your tape isn't the entirety of your texture, hopefully you can see this where I put some lines. That differentiation of the surface, that has fun effects too. It really is just a case of you exploring, trying different things out and seeing what works for you. You can see how you get a much clearer, cleaner line over the paper than the textured line over the tape. Black pencil crayon over tape, paper. So whatever materials you've got, don't make this thing be your thing. but take some time. Like, what I mean by don't make it be your thing. Don't get so caught up in this that you forget to go back and actually do the work. Well, I've been really enjoying doing these for a while. Okay, but that wasn't the point. The point is explore a little bit, but then get back to work. If this breaks you out of a mold, that did nothing. If this breaks you out of a block or a mold or something like that that you're trapped in, where you're not actually getting things done, well, my goodness, go for it. Pursue it. See what you can discover. See what might come out of it for you, and really pursue that. And really play with that, because why not? Why not? I think I'm going to wrap up. I've got a bunch of different stuff done. I'm going to wrap up now, and I'll put these together, and I will post them the same way as I have the previous page, and then tomorrow is going to be all about mucking up your surface, and I'll show you that with Post-its and with different pieces of paper that the image runs right across and through, and there's not going to be an awful lot of that, because again, this is about you exploring. Oh, hey, thanks, Frank. That's very nice of you. I'll post this up. Take a look at it again, just like we did the last one, and see if there's anything in there that you yourself might want to chase down and pursue a little bit more. There's an awful lot more examples on this than there was on this one. Just not as large and as complex as this one. So it's going to take a little more scrutinization. But whatever it does, look into that for yourself and see. Test out different things about what the warmth or darkness is of the blacks, because you'll see different degrees of those, and because there is a warmth, there's a temperature value to black in our imagery, and you want to have a consistency to that as you're working. So evaluate those things and evaluate stuff that you feel comfortable with working with, and see what you can find out. I'll be back at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Have some more fun. In the meantime, keep creating. Thanks for hanging out today, guys. Bye for now.